My grandson slapped me, and my son simply left. He's just playing. The bride smiled. Go clean up and stop whisking. After such humiliation, I sued them for the house and lost custody of the child. If you're ready for this journey, make sure you hit that subscribe button and give this a like so you don't miss the updates. And let me know in the comments what city you're watching from. It's always lovely to see where everyone is. I'm Linda, 66, retired school secretary, the one who remembers everyone's birthday and carries stain remover pens in her purse like a superhero utility belt. I don't rattle easily. I raised 2 kids on a teacher aide salary after their dad took off with a bowling league brunette in '89, and I came out the other side with a paid-off Corolla and a spine you can't buy on Amazon. But I'll tell you the exact second I felt the hot, tinny taste of humiliation in my mouth. A Sunday in May, buttercream in a glass bowl, my wrist flicking the whisk just the way my own mother taught me, and my 4-year-old grandson, Tyler, popping a sticky little palm across my cheek, more surprised than sting, while my son, Mark, chuckled and said, "Relax, Mom, he's just playing." And Jessica, their bride, wrinkled her nose at the powdered sugar dusting my shirt and said, sing-song, like I was the help, "Go clean up and stop whisking." It was the laugh that did it. The laugh and the way my son didn't look at me. Like, if he met my eyes, he might remember who taught him to tie his shoes and talk to people with respect. I dabbed the sugar off my blouse with a damp paper towel, and I set the whisk down. I am not their maid. I am the woman who helped buy the very house they are standing in. See, when they first started looking at houses in 2021, interest rates were still friendly and inventory was mean. They had a realtor who favored white kitchens and adjectives like airy and light-filled, and a lender who wanted a down payment they couldn't scrape together because the wedding in a barn had eaten their savings. I am not cheap with love, and sometimes I'm not cheap with money either. I pulled $85,000 out of my HELOC, the equity I'd spent a lifetime building, and wired it over before the close. I have the transfer receipt printed, labeled, and tucked in a manila folder in the hall closet. House, Mark and Jess, down payment. The plan, our plan, was for them to add me to title after closing. We had the emails. We had the text messages. "Mom, we'll add you on after the dust settles. You'll always have a room here." I took a picture of that message because you don't get to my age without learning that people forget what they promise when life gets comfortable. The dust did not settle. The dust blew into my eyes and made a home there. I didn't set out to be litigious. I wanted to bake a birthday cake and spoil a little boy and sit on a white couch I helped buy without being told to go clean up. But a week after the slap, I told Jessica, calmly, in the sunny kitchen while Tyler napped on the sectional, "Honey, it's time to add me to the title." Her mouth did a thin line. She wiped her hands on a dish towel and said, "Oh, Linda, that complicates our mortgage. The lender won't like that. We can't have another owner of record." She said it as if I was asking to move in with a pack of rescue beagles. "Maybe we can just consider your money as a gift?" I have given many gifts in my life. A down payment with a paper trail and an email promising to be added to title is not one of them. When I pressed, her softness evaporated and the words sharpened. "You should be grateful we let you be so involved with Tyler." And the "let you" clanged like a pot lid in my ears. I didn't like the leverage in it. I didn't like the unspoken, play ball or else. I went home, made a cup of tea, and pulled my folders. There were the email chains. "We'll add you onto title after closing. Promise." The bank receipt, photos of me in front of the sold sign, grinning like I'd won a cruise. I even saved a draft quitclaim deed a notary friend had mocked up, just in case, when everyone was rosy and full of gratitude. I printed everything and made an appointment with a real estate attorney named Janelle who church friends swore by. She wore navy suits and looked me in the eye, and when she said, "constructive trust," I nodded like I knew what that meant. She explained it. "You give money with the understanding you'll have an interest, the court can impose a trust to keep things from being unjust." She said, "We'll file for an equitable lien at the very least. This isn't a gift.
I wish I could tell you there was a clean arc from that appointment to a happy ending, but this story has switchbacks. When Mark found out I'd seen a lawyer, the temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. He called and asked why I was trying to take our house. I reminded him, gently, that I'd never be trying to take it, only to be recognized for what I'd already put in. He said I was making Jess anxious and that the market was weird and I should just trust them. I trusted him when he was 6 and promised he hadn't broken the lamp, and then I stepped on the glass with bare feet. Trust in my family requires evidence. We filed. They hired a lawyer with glossy shoes who smiled like a shark. I heard words you don't expect to hear from your own child's counsel: gift, interfere, overbearing. Jessica filed an affidavit that made me sound like I was trying to move into their marriage. The opposing attorney took screenshots of texts where I'd offered to pay for Tyler's preschool and made it look like I was trying to buy him. They dragged out the fact that I'd had Tyler at my house 3 days a week that winter because daycare was on a wait list and Jessica's Etsy shop was taking off. They said I created dependency and confusion. It was breathtaking the way kindness can be reframed as control when there's a mortgage and pride on the line. The first blow landed at the emergency hearing, where the judge, red tie, weary eyes, said words I still hear sometimes when I'm doing the dishes. The court finds insufficient evidence of an agreement to grant ownership interest. Apparently, in my state, emails and "will add you after" texts aren't enough to overcome the statute of frauds if you don't have a signed, notarized agreement that says exactly what you think it says. Janelle squeezed my forearm as if to say, I know, we can try a different angle. But that day, I lost. No constructive trust, no equitable lien, just the court's gentle suggestion that interfamily generosity often leads to misunderstanding and everyone should communicate better. And then, because apparently humiliation comes in combos, Jessica filed for a temporary order limiting my visitation with Tyler. She claimed I'd undermined their parenting by disciplining him after he hit me. If taking a whisk away and saying we don't hit is discipline, then guilty as charged. But it didn't matter. For 6 weeks, I saw my grandson exactly twice in a supervised playroom with a woman named Dana who wrote on a clipboard when I hugged him too long. "We're building healthy boundaries," she chirped. I drove home after those visits and sat in the garage with the engine off, hands on the wheel, wondering how many times a heart can be asked to bear witness to unkindness before it turns to stone. I am not a woman who turns to stone. When people show you who they are, you believe them, but you don't go to war without a map. So I did what every woman with the remnants of a PTA skill set and a lifetime of office work does. I researched. I read HOA bylaws like bedtime stories. I learned to use the county recorder's website. I brought brownies to the building department and listened to an inspector talk about permits and setbacks like they were gossip. I'm 66. I bake, I listen, people tell me things because no one thinks I'm a threat. Here are things no one expected me to learn. 1. They'd converted the garage into a studio for Jessica's influencer videos, shiplap, recessed lighting, and a rough plumbed sink without pulling a permit. It was in the listing photos when they'd looked at the house. The seller had done it in a hurry. Unpermitted work isn't a hanging offense, but HOAs get funny about driveways full of parked cars because the garage is now a soundstage. Funny like $100 a day fines. 2. Their mortgage had an owner occupancy clause with a 12-month lock that prohibited short-term rentals. Guess who had a cozy guest suite listed on an app for just weekend warriors to help cover the mortgage because #adulting? The profile photo was Jessica's, teeth whiter than truth. The calendar showed bookings on dates I'd begged to see Tyler and been told he was overstimulated. 3. When we sent the down payment, Mark had emailed the mortgage processor from his work account saying, "My mom helped us with the funds. She's going to be on the title later. Is that okay?" The processor responded, "All funds must be borrower's own or documented gift. Adding non-borrower to title post-closing may constitute a violation of your loan terms." The little thread was still in his outbox because my son treats email like a junk drawer. He'd given me the password once when his iCloud locked him out, and he never changed it. I didn't go snooping, but when he asked me to print a W-2 because their printer wasn't being nice, the subject lines were just there. I made a note to ask Janelle about what's legal to use, but the seed was planted. Their lender would want to know if promises had been made that weren't disclosed. Lenders don't like surprises.
4. Insurance. Their homeowner's policy had an exclusion for business use of premises without endorsement. The garage studio plus short-term rental? The policy was a paper umbrella in a thunderstorm. I wasn't going to destroy my family. I was going to invite consequences into a house where they'd been holding the door closed with their feet. I started small and boring. I ran for the HOA board. The neighborhood was run by a handful of retired men who made PowerPoints about mailbox heights. They were thrilled for a woman with a binder to join. I smiled, brought lemon bars, and asked for enforcement reports. I didn't mention Mark and Jessica. I just asked, how do we handle unpermitted conversions? And what's our process for short-term rentals? The president, Ron, with hair like a white dandelion, said, "We send letters, then fines. It's tedious." I volunteered to chair the compliance committee. I had time. I had patience. I had a son who had forgotten who taught him to say please and thank you. While the HOA machine sputtered to life, I took care of my own house. I refinanced my HELOC into a fixed-rate personal loan under my revocable trust's name and firewalled my assets. I sat with a CPA who smelled gently of peppermint and mapped out what would happen if the down payment were characterized as a gift. "Did you file a gift tax return?" he asked. I hadn't, because it wasn't a gift. He nodded, and we made notes anyway. I am a woman who likes to be ready 3 moves ahead, even when I'm playing checkers. If you're wondering where Mark was in all this, my boy who loved Free Willy and cried at the end, he was busy pretending nothing was wrong. He'd text quick updates about the Browns and send pictures of Tyler with spaghetti on his face, little olive branches dipped in marinara, as if he could distract me from the stump of the tree he'd cut down. I did not bite. I kept my replies warm and brief. "Miss you. Kiss that boy for me. Bank your fire. Save your oxygen. A person can drown on dry land." The visitation piece gnawed at my bones more than the house. I wasn't trying to raise Tyler. I was trying to be a grandma who taught him to rinse strawberries and say sorry when he was wrong. But the court had been glued for the moment to Jessica's story of me as an overbearing matriarch. Janelle told me the best thing I could do was be boring and good. No stirring the pot on social media, no grandparent rights tirades. Document everything. Show up to the supervised visits with stickers and snack boxes. Time has a way of clarifying credibility, she said. Judges notice patterns. So I documented, and time ticked, and in between I gathered threads of a different kind of truth. There was the first letter from the HOA, gentle as a church usher. "Dear homeowner, this is a friendly reminder that garages must be maintained to house vehicles." Ron signed it with a flourish. "No fines yet, just a reminder." There was a second letter about the short-term rental policy with a screenshot of their listing printed in color. I didn't print it. Karen from around the corner did, because Karen may play bunco, but she also knows her bylaws.
Then came a warning about advertising a business from the home without approval. Each letter asked for corrective action within 30 days. Each letter used words like community standards and compliance. And, maybe, this part felt mean, but I won't apologize for it, they made Jessica's Instagram aesthetic curdle when she looked at the mailbox. And just when he thought he had me backed into a corner, he forgot who he was dealing with. Stick with me, because you'll want to see how this plays out. That summer, a hailstorm stitched dents into every roof on the block. You could hear hammers 2 streets over. Mark called, righteous. Our claim's being slow-walked. Can you call your insurance guy? I said I'd bring over the number. I did, along with oatmeal cookies and a smile that didn't reach my eyes. Their adjuster came, measured, climbed, and frowned at the garage studio and the booking calendar still live on the app. We'll need to review endorsements, he said into his iPad. A week later, the claim was under investigation. Their policy didn't cover business use. Hail doesn't care about hashtags. I didn't gloat. Well, maybe to a reen next door over coffee I let out a tiny bless their hearts. But mostly, I stayed disciplined. Janelle filed an appeal in the property case. Narrow, technical, not a Hail Mary, but a nudge. We're not going to relitigate feelings. We're going to show the appellate court that the lower court ignored the doctrine of unjust enrichment. Legal words, yes, but what they meant was simple. You don't get to keep my money and treat me like a nuisance. You don't get to call it a gift because it's convenient. There are boundaries even when the people crossing them share your last name.
Then, the piece I didn't expect fell into my lap on a Tuesday at 11:17 a.m. when I was cleaning out the bottom drawer of my old desk, pens that had dried up, retirement cards with flowers on them, and found a blue folder labeled Taxes 2021. I'm tidy, I'm not a hoarder. But this had a printout tucked in it from an email thread I'd forgotten, the one where Mark asked the loan processor about adding me to title after closing. The processor's reply was careful but clear, don't. And there was a line where she said, any undisclosed intent to modify ownership interests post-closing may constitute misrepresentation. That's a word with teeth. Misrepresentation to a lender is how you end up with loan acceleration, or, at minimum, stern letters no one wants to read. I brought it to Janelle. She pursed her lips. This is, interesting, she said. We don't threaten people with their lender. That can look extortive. But we can, ethically, clarify facts for institutions that rely on truthful disclosures, especially if you're protecting your financial interest. She drafted a letter to the mortgage servicer, not an accusation, just a set of questions about policy on undisclosed ownership changes and short-term rentals under an owner-occupancy loan. She attached public HOA notices and screenshots of public listings. No passwords, no private snooping. She CC'd Mark's lawyer. Transparency is a disinfectant. I slept well that night for the first time in months. 2 weeks later, another domino wobbled. The city's building department, now paying a bit more attention thanks to HOA chatter, tagged the property for an inspection. The unpermitted garage work needed to be either permitted retroactively or restored. It'll be a fine and some drywall dust, Ron said at the HOA meeting, flipping through his folder. No big deal. Unless they don't fix it. Meanwhile, the servicer sent a polite letter reminding them of their owner occupancy certification and requesting clarification on advertised transient lodging. Lenders have no sense of humor. Ask me how I know. The phone rang. Mark. He sounded small. Mom, what are you doing? I told him I was requiring the world to be honest with him because he had not been honest with me. I told him I wanted my interest acknowledged or my money back, and I wanted my time with my grandson restored because the discipline I gave him was boundaries and love. You're blowing up my life, he said. I said, I am cleaning up mine. He hung up. We didn't talk for a while. There's a way people look at older women like me when we insist on what's fair, like we're making a fuss, like we're embarrassing ourselves with our seriousness. But I'd spent too long rolling pennies and wrangling recess duty to let a 44-year-old man and his Instagram bride rewrite basic decency. I kept following the rules because rules are how women like me make a dent in a world that rewards the loud. And then, because every storm has a quiet edge, Tyler's therapist,
They'd enrolled him in one when his preschool said he was having big feelings, wrote a note recommending he spend consistent time with stable, loving, extended family. It was written carefully, therapists always are, but it said enough. Janelle filed it with the court along with a stack of my supervised visit reports dotted with phrases like appropriate and warm. Nothing heroic, just boring goodness documented. At the same hearing where the judge nudged Mark and Jessica to address their HOA violations forthwith, he also restored my unsupervised visitation on alternating Saturdays. I walked out of that courthouse in flats and a cardigan feeling 10 feet tall. Don't go anywhere, I wanted to say to you then, the one with coffee and time to listen. He was about to get exactly what he deserved, and I had a front row seat. One more detail before we press the gas. Remember that draft quitclaim deed my notary friend mocked up back when everything was rose gold and promises? I found it again in my file, but this time tucked behind it a yellow post-it fluttered out. It was in Jessica's handwriting, curlicue hearts over her eyes, from the week after closing. We'll sign this as soon as the lender says it's okay. Don't worry, we're so grateful. Love you. J and M. Dated, sweet, specific. I took a photo from 3 angles. Gratitude captured, intent captured, promises how a way of aging into proof.
The Saturday after the court restored my unsupervised time, I picked up Tyler at 10 a.m. sharp with a tote bag full of sidewalk talk and apple slices. He ran down the driveway in Velcro sneakers that screamed with each step, arms open, hair askew, and for a minute, the whole world narrowed to a little boy who smelled like shampoo and sunshine. "Grandma, can we make a dragon?" he asked, breathless. We spent an hour on the sidewalk etching a dragon that coiled from the mailbox to the storm drain. I drew scales, he drew fire. When Jessica came outside to hover, she always hovered, Tyler pointed at the dragon and said, "Grandma says no hitting." He said it like a declaration, not an accusation. I met her eye. I didn't need a judge or an audience for that moment. The chalk on my knees and the boy at my side were enough. But this isn't a story about chalk. It's about consequences and the way they arrive in the mail, in city trucks, in tight lips and unsigned checks. A week later, the HOA fines started to accrue for the garage studio. $100 a day after a 30-day grace period, with the note that failure to comply may result in a lien. I'd recused myself formally from any votes related to Mark and Jessica's address. I had Ron initial my recusal in the minutes. I am many things, but I'm not stupid. I don't need any judge or YouTube commenter saying I abused a position. Still, the paperwork moved on without me. Ron's form letters didn't have my fingerprints, just his tidy font in the same italics he'd used for mailbox heights. I kept my head down, brought lemon bars, and let the process work. Meanwhile, the mortgage servicer's follow-up letter had a different temperature, cooler, more clinical. They reminded Mark and Jessica of their owner-occupancy certification and asked them to verify they weren't using the property for short-term rentals or commercial filming. The letter asked for a signed affidavit within 15 days. 15 days is a long time if you're growing tomatoes. It's short if you're backpedaling lies. I didn't hear from Mark. I didn't need to. You can tell a lot about a person by how loud their silence is. The city inspector came on a Tuesday morning with a white truck and a clipboard. I know because Karen texted me while watering her hydrangeas. "He's here!" She puts spaces between every letter when she's excited. H-E-S-H-E-R-E. He left a bright orange notice glued to the garage door. Stop work. Permit required. The glued like concrete. You can't peel those notices off politely. They telegraph your business to every dog walker and jogger who passes. I took no joy. All right, a little. I'm human. When they finally called, it wasn't Mark. It was Jessica. She has 2 voices, the honeyed influencer lilt and the flat one she uses when she's cornered. This was the latter. "Linda, you're embarrassing us." "Jessica," I said, "you're embarrassing yourselves. We could have handled this privately." She huffed. We tried privately. We tried after cake. We tried after court. Privately didn't work. Long exhale. Then carefully, what do you want? It wasn't the words. It was the way she said them, like a business call. Not a daughter-in-law to a mother-in-law, a brand to a contractor with a delayed deliverable. It clarified something for me. I wasn't going to get apology and insight out of these two like water from a stone. I was going to get compliance and math. I want either my name on the title in proportion to my contribution, or I want my money back with interest. I also want Tyler to grow up seeing adults make things right. She tried the soft approach first. She said, we're struggling. The fines and the letters, it's a lot. Can we set up a plan? Of course, but not one where I'm the only grown-up in the room. She hung up on, we'll call you. They didn't. I'd like to say I went about my life, book club, water aerobics, coloring with Tyler, without thinking about them. But I'm 66, not made of stone. I woke up sometimes at 3 a.m. with phrases swirling, unjust enrichment, lien, affidavit, and the copper taste of their laughter in my mouth. The laugh from the whisk-a-day. I'd brew chamomile and sit on the back steps, listening to the neighborhood sprinklers tick like clocks. I'd think about my mother, who raised me on coupons and rules, who would have said, don't let them make you feel small, Linda. Small is how they get away with it.
So I kept going, one tidy inch at a time. I put together a clean, calm packet for their attorney, a ledger of my contribution, principal, not some fantasy number, the date of transfer, the emails promising title later, the sticky note with hearts over the eyes. I included a proposal, a recorded deed of trust securing my $85,000 with a modest interest rate, payable in 3 years or upon sale or refinance. I left the door open, a path that didn't require anyone to admit anything in writing that would make a lender quake. I gave them a lifeline, because even in a storm, I'm not trying to drown the ship. I'm trying to stop them from stealing my oars. We got a counteroffer that was not an offer at all. Client maintains funds were a gift from a mother to her son. No secured interest will be granted. Client is, however, willing to offer $10,000 as a token of appreciation, contingent upon dismissal of all claims. I smiled at Janelle over the conference table, like we were sharing a joke. A token of appreciation, I repeated. Did they buy that phrase at the Hallmark store? I could frame it, Janelle said dryly, but we'll just reject. We did, and we doubled down on the appeal. The lower court had treated my emails and the quitclaim draft as inadmissible hearsay for the core issue. The appeal brief argued otherwise. It's astonishing how many different ways you can say, what did you think she was wiring $85,000 for? Cupcakes? And still sound dignified. And just when he thought he had me backed into a corner, he forgot who he was dealing with. Stick with me because you'll want to see how this plays out. Around this time, Jessica did something I genuinely didn't expect. She posted a video, not about me, heaven forbid, about boundaries and toxic expectations from older generations who use money to control. She cried on camera, the pretty kind of tears that catch the light, and set it over piano music. I didn't watch it. Irene did, and summarized. I don't consume content that turns my life into someone else's brand. But I did note the comments. They weren't what Jessica wanted. Women my age and younger wrote things like, "Did you have a written agreement?" And if she paid the down payment, why wouldn't she be on title? And you can set boundaries without stealing. A few noted that the short-term rental listings seemed to violate lender rules.
The internet is wild, yes, but every now and then it holds a mirror up to the truth. Sponsors pay attention to comments. I know this because I spent 2 mornings reading FTC guidelines with my coffee like it was a cozy mystery. I did not report her. I did not call her brand partners. I did, however, send Jessica a firm, private email CCing her attorney, reminding her that if she insinuated public falsehoods about me that harmed my reputation, I would pursue defamation claims. I wasn't threatening to sue an Instagram video. I was drawing a clear boundary. You can vent about older generations all you want. You cannot lie about what I did with my money. She took the video down a day later. No apology, just the quiet removal like a magician's tablecloth trick. The city required them to apply for an after-the-fact permit to legalize the garage conversion. That meant plans, fees, and, delightfully, a requirement to restore vehicle parking while they waited. They had to empty the studio. Every faux vintage prop and light went into their driveway beneath a blue tarp that flapped like a surrender flag. The short-term rental, after the lender letter, winked offline. Someone, maybe the servicer, maybe Prudence, had spooked them. Without the extra income, the fines stung. They sent one HOA check that bounced. Ron clucked and resent the notice with a $35 fee. Bureaucracy isn't pretty. It's persistent. Then July hit. Hail had turned into a heat wave, and the one working mini-split in the garage wasn't enough to cool the tarped mess. Jessica moved her filming to their living room, and Tyler started napping at school because the house was hot and tense. I know because the preschool, which knows me as Grandma Linda who brings story time, called to ask if I could volunteer for Splash Day. I showed up with popsicles and a sun hat. Tyler ran into the sprinkler like a boy who didn't know adults were busy setting fires around him. After Splash Day, the preschool director, a woman with kind eyes and an iron spine, pulled me aside. She said, "We're concerned. He's more dysregulated on the days when there are construction people at the house. There's a lot of yelling." She didn't say who was yelling. She didn't have to. We both heard it in our heads. Jessica's flat voice turning sharp, Mark's attempts at joking morphing into barbs. The director suggested a written plan for Tyler's routines. I passed the suggestion to Janelle, who filed it as an addendum at the next hearing. The judge, red tie again, read it and didn't hide his annoyance. "The child is not a pawn." He turned to their side. "I expect the adults to behave like adults."
It's funny how the smallest sentence can feel like a win. The appellate court set oral arguments for September. That felt both near and forever away. In the meantime, the HOA lien ripened. Fines plus late fees plus costs. When a lien ripens, it's like a piece of fruit that finally drops into your hand. Ron reminded me, again, neatly in the minutes, that I was recused from any discussion of this particular lien. The board voted, legally and without me, to proceed with a notice of intent to record. It's banal paperwork with sharp edges. If they didn't pay, the lien could attach to title and complicate any refinance or sale. They didn't pay. In August, a letter arrived at my house, not theirs. It was from a local title company that handles HOA lien assignments. The letter was general. If your association wishes to assign liens to interested parties, but it set off a small, practical bell in my head. I walked it to Ron, not because I planned to pounce, but because transparency has kept me safe. I asked, "Is this a thing?" He nodded. "We've assigned liens before. It's a way to recoup enforcement costs faster. We don't do it often." "I'm recused from anything to do with my son," I said quickly. "I can't touch it." Ron patted the air. "Of course." He paused. "But another member could."
He raised his eyebrows at the beige wall, like that neutral paint might volunteer. I did not assign myself their lien. I did, however, tell Irene. Irene told her brother, who invests in dumb, boring things like municipal bonds and HOA liens. He called the property manager, filled out forms, and, entirely out of my hands, bought the debt at a discount. He's a kind man with a precise mind. He sent a text, "I'll be ethical." He also sent a second text, "Debt is a teacher." I sipped my coffee and thought about the ways the world has of circling back. 2 days later, a different letter landed at Mark and Jessica's. A notice of assignment and a demand for payment, with the amount bolded like a headline. It wasn't ruinous, it was just non-negotiable. The kind of letter you can't charm with a ring light. The due date was firm. The fees would climb. These are not my rules, these are gravity. They listed the house. The Zillow photos were gorgeous. Of course they were. Jessica could make a broom closet look like a spa day. White curtains billowed. The kitchen island gleamed like an orthodontist's smile. The garage, notably, showed empty concrete. 2 gracious spaces ready for cars like in the HOA brochure. The unpermitted sink had vanished. The listing agent wrote, "Motivated sellers." I'm not proud of this, but I drove by during an open house. I went late after the looky-loos thinned out. I introduced myself as the neighbor. The agent, a woman in stilettos that sunk into the lawn, chirped about light-filled spaces and flex rooms. She avoided the garage door. I didn't press. I wandered the place where I'd once iced a cake and been told to stop whisking. There's a kind of grief in walking through a goodbye before you get to say it. I stood in the pantry and remembered teaching Tyler how to stack cans with the labels facing front. I remembered the soft surprise of a little hand hitting my cheek and the way my son laughed. At the door, the agent asked if I had any questions. I said, "Just one. Are the sellers open to offers contingent on inspection and resolution of HOA matters?" She paused, smile faltering. She said, "All standard contingencies considered." Then she added, because she couldn't help herself, "Do you know of anything specific?" I said, "I know that HOAs enforce. Good luck." The next day, I got a call from Mark. No small talk. "Mom, are you trying to sabotage our sale?" "No," I said. "I am ensuring disclosure." "You're ruining me," he muttered. I let the words go past me like a breeze that doesn't deserve a shiver. He still thought this was a drama with me as the villain and himself as the beleaguered hero. I couldn't fix his narrative for him. I could only keep writing mine. Offers trickled. Buyers now read HOA minutes and Google addresses. A savvy one asked for a credit for the fines and a contingent holdback until the city issued a final permit. Their agent also asked delicately, "Was there a contribution from a family member toward the down payment that is subject to dispute?" I didn't have to prompt that question. Truth tends to leak like a slow faucet. The listing agent called Janelle and tried to scold her for interfering. Janelle, who has the patience of a stone angel, simply said, "We have a pending appeal and a public lien. Your sellers are obligated to disclose material facts. If they don't, they'll have bigger problems than my client."
Bigger problems arrived in a cream envelope with a courthouse return address. The appellate court scheduled our hearing for September 14th. We were to have 15 minutes per side. Janelle prepped me the way a good teacher preps for a debate. Clear points, no digressions, no heat. "We are not here to relive family drama," she said. "We are here to say, money changed hands with a clear purpose. Equity requires recognition. Otherwise, unjust enrichment." She made me practice saying equitable remedy until it felt like a prayer. The night before the hearing, I made chicken salad and couldn't eat it. I ironed a blouse and re-ironed it.
I checked my folder, bank statements, emails, the sticky note. I looked at a photo of me and my son on his 8th birthday, his front teeth newly in, his arm hooked around my neck. I let myself cry, quietly, into a dish towel. Then I washed my face, put the photo back, and set my alarm. In the courtroom, the presiding judge had a voice like gravel and eyes that missed nothing. The panel asked sharp questions of both sides. To their credit, they pushed Janelle too. Why didn't your client get a signed agreement? Janelle answered without flinching. Because families often don't formalize what they should. Equity exists to prevent that gap from producing injustice. When opposing counsel said the word gift, the judge with the gravel voice raised his palm. Counsel, he said, I have a hard time reconciling the gift framing with contemporaneous communications about title. He gestured to the sticky note. This note is dated a week after closing. Opposing counsel tried to claim it was gratitude ephemera. The courtroom actually snorted. Not audible, just a collective air shift that said, sir. They took it under advisement. You'll get a decision in due course, the presiding judge said. Courts move at their own speed. People in crisis move at panic speed. The mismatch is brutal. A week later, 7 days that stretched like toffee, Jessica's agent called Janelle, whispering. You could hear the flop sweat through the phone. We have an offer, she said, but they want a recorded deed of trust to your client for the down payment amount payable at closing from proceeds. Can your client agree to release all other claims upon receipt? I stared at Janelle, then at the phone, then at the ceiling tile turned watermark in the corner, like it could answer. Janelle covered the receiver and raised an eyebrow. We are not accepting an IOU. We want a secured interest recorded now, or we're waiting for the appellate court decision. I surprised myself. I said, we counter. We'll accept a recorded deed of trust now, securing the $85,000 plus interest, with an escrow holdback for HOA fines and permit costs. Funds to me first at closing, dismissal with prejudice upon receipt. Janelle grinned like a coach whose team finally ran the play. That, she said, is an elegant solution. We sent it. They balked. The buyer didn't. The buyer wanted the house badly enough to tolerate paperwork if it meant clarity. Their agent wrote, our client prefers sellers who can solve their problems like grown-ups. I almost framed that email. They signed. The title company recorded the deed of trust in my revocable trust's name, and for the first time, my interest in that house existed in the county's bones, not just on my printer paper. I didn't own their home. I owned a claim against its heartbeat. It wasn't the mother-in-law's suite they'd once promised. It was, however, a receipt with teeth. Then the economy did something it always does at the worst time. Interest rates nudged up. The buyer's lender reran numbers, and the new payment, plus the holdback for fines, made the deal wobble. They asked for a price reduction. Jessica's smile on Instagram that day could have cut glass. Mark sounded gravelly when he called. Mom, he said, we need you to waive your interest to make this work. I looked at the deed of trust in my hand and thought about the whisk, the slap, the way humiliation lodges behind your ribs. No, I said, I will not pay twice for your house. Silence. You'd rather we lose it? You'd rather I subsidize the part where you learned nothing? He didn't answer. He didn't have to. We were done bargaining with feelings. They took the reduction. The buyer stayed. The city finalized the permit after they tore out and redid 15 feet of drywall and a run of questionable plumbing. The HOA fines were paid from the holdback, Irene's brother reimbursed with statutory interest, and 2 men with a ladder took down the stop work notice. I drove by after dusk, when porch lights looked like honest. The garage door was closed. Something in my shoulders softened, like a knot finally giving.
We got the appellate decision 2 days before closing. I was in the produce aisle, choosing cantaloupe, when Janelle called. We won, she said. Just like that. No crescendo, no parade. Reversed and remanded, they held the lower court errored in concluding there was insufficient evidence of an agreement. They recognized your contribution and directed the trial court to impose an equitable lien. I leaned on my cart. I cried in front of the melons. A teenage clerk, pretending not to notice, handed me a Kleenex. Allergies, I lied. He nodded, relieved. An equitable lien meant exactly what we just created with the deed of trust, plus the force of law. Even if the sale fell apart, even if they tried to refinance, the court had finally said the quiet part out loud. You don't get to keep her money and call it love. Closing day came like rain after a drought. Slow at first, then all at once. Title sent a wire confirmation. The buyer signed a stack of papers that could choke a horse. Mark sat in a chair with his head bent. Jessica clicked a pen with a hand that trembled. I didn't go to the table. Janelle did. She texted me a photo of the settlement statement with my line items circled. Disbursement to Linda X Revocable Trust, $85,000 plus interest. Numbers aren't love, but sometimes when love fails, numbers are justice. I didn't spend it. I moved it to a high-yield account and let it sit like a lake in August, still and reflective. I wrote a thank you card to Janelle with a Starbucks gift card tucked inside. Professionals don't need homemade cookies, but they also don't mind caffeine. You'd think that was the end. It wasn't, because money was only one lattice in a trellis of wrong. There were still the people we all were at the beginning of this. A woman who'd been told to go clean up in a house she'd helped buy, a boy with Velcro shoes, a son who laughed at the wrong moment, a woman who turned other people's lives into content. Consequences had to ripple into character, or else they were just fees. 2 weeks after closing, at my next Saturday with Tyler, he came out of their rental, a smaller townhome with beige carpet that tried its best, with a backpack and an extra wary look. "Mommy says we can't make messes," he whispered, as if the word itself might stain. I crouched. "At Grandma's, we make dragons," I whispered back. He smiled like the sun cracking clouds. We went to the park. We drew a dragon that wrapped around the picnic table. We talked about big feelings and small hands. We ate apple slices. He told me his new preschool teacher had a pet turtle. I told him I once had a turtle named Buster who ran away. True. And that sometimes love looks like letting go. Also true. On the way back, he fell asleep in the car seat, his mouth open, catching dreams like raindrops. From the front door, Mark watched us. He looked older. He looked like a man who had recently been handed a syllabus labeled adulthood and realized it was due yesterday. He cleared his throat when I carried Tyler in. "Thank you," he said. The words were small, but real. For what you did with the sale." "You mean for not loaning you my spine?" I said lightly. He winced. I gentled. "You paid me back. You did the right thing when you had no other way. That counts." He nodded. "I'm sorry about—" He made a vague circle in the air, like he was stirring a pot. "All of it." "Be specific," I said. He blinked. I waited. He swallowed. "I'm sorry I laughed when Tyler hit you," he said. "I'm sorry I let Jess talk to you like that. I'm sorry I didn't put you on the title when I said I would." He stared at the beige carpet. "I thought it would make me look weak, like I needed you." "You did need me," I said. "Needing people doesn't make you weak. Using them does." He nodded again, fumbled a yes that sounded like a cough. It wasn't absolution. It wasn't even a full apology, really, but it was the start of a language we hadn't spoken in a year, one where the verbs matched the facts. Jessica appeared behind him, all angles and careful hair. "We're resetting," she said, as if it were a software patch. "I'm taking a break from collabs, focusing on family." I didn't say good. I didn't say what took you so long. I said Tyler needs consistency, because he does, because that's all I can require. A month later, the trial court, following the appellate mandate, entered an order memorializing the equitable lien, which by then was moot but delicious on paper. The judge added a note. The court encourages parties to formalize expectations when interfamily transactions involve significant sums. Translation: sign your agreements, folks. Love is not a ledger, but money is.
Don't go anywhere. I want to tell you now, spoon halfway to your mouth, because here's where the shock crawls out from under the porch, slow, unexpected, and mean. While sorting my own files, closing statements, court orders, copies for my trust binder, I discovered a credit pull on my reports from a utility company dated the week they closed on the house. It was minor, a soft inquiry,
but the account had been opened with my name as an authorized contact. I didn't authorize anything. I called the number. The rep cheerfully told me my daughter had added me to help with verifications. My daughter has been dead 12 years. My only daughter-in-law is the one who tells me to stop whisking. I sat very still. In an instant, I remembered the day we moved their fridge, how Jessica waved a clipboard at me while the delivery guys hauled it in, saying, "Sign here, Linda, it's for the warranty." And I scrawled my name between the brown cardboard and beeping truck without my glasses on. It wasn't a warranty. It was a general authorization. My stomach went cold. Identity misuse is a big word for a small act that tells you everything. It wasn't criminal in the way people go to jail for, not as it stood. It was sly. It was a boundary crossed because it was convenient. I requested the document. They emailed a PDF. My signature looked like itself, except for one small thing: the date. It was wrong, off by a week before the fridge was even delivered. I compared it to the receipt from the appliance store, to texts, to the photo of Tylen in a box playing fort on delivery day. Facts are grandma's revenge. I forwarded it to Janelle. She called in that voice lawyers use when they smell smoke. "We're not starting a war," she said. "We are, however, going to document this. And we're going to send a letter reminding them that any future use of your name or credit without permission will be treated as fraud." I didn't tell Mark. I didn't trust him to not minimize. I sent the letter. It was a scalpel, not a cudgel. Clear, cold, without adjectives. Jessica replied with a one-line email. "Understood. No apology. Just compliance. Sometimes that's all you get." I wish I could tell you that the next holidays were a Rockwell painting. They weren't. Thanksgiving was 2 tables, mine and theirs, and a quiet exchange of Tupperware in the driveway. Christmas was a schedule negotiated by Google Calendar invites. But Tyler's bedtime at my house included dragons and stories and a jar of buttons he loved to sort by color. And when he hit my cheek by accident with a flailing arm during a tickle game, he immediately said, without prompting, "Sorry, Grandma," and patted my face soft. I don't need much. Then, just as the dust seemed to settle into something like a cautious peace, a certified letter arrived for me from the state's Child Welfare Agency. My heart slammed against my ribs so hard I had to sit down. It said, in sterile fonts, that an anonymous report had been filed alleging that I emotionally manipulated my grandson and spoke negatively about his parents during visits. The letter said an investigator might reach out. It was thorough, direct, and the kind of thing that takes both hands to open because they're trembling. I called Janelle. We breathed. "If they're behind it," she said, "it's a grave miscalculation. We will cooperate fully. We will also, if it's false, pursue the consequences for knowingly making a false report." I set the kettle on. I squared my shoulders. I put the buttons back in the jar. Then I put on a cardigan because I am a woman who meets the state at the door with sensible shoes and the truth arranged in a binder. I know this part is hard to hear, but it's important. The truth was about to come out, and it was going to be glorious. The investigator showed up on a Wednesday afternoon with a canvas tote and a face that gave nothing away. She introduced herself as Miss Patel, offered a card, and asked if we could sit at the kitchen table. I had already set out iced tea and a plate of store-bought cookies that looked homemade if you didn't wear your glasses. She didn't take a cookie. She did take notes. "These things go better when we talk in specifics," she said, professional but kind. "I'll ask questions about what's been reported, and I'll ask to see the spaces where the child spends time. We may also contact collateral sources, the preschool, pediatrician, others who observe the child." "Of course," I said. "You'll find my house very boring." She smiled a little at that. Then she asked, "Did I speak negatively about Tyler's parents in front of him?" "No." "Did I badmouth them to other adults within his hearing?" "No."
Did I pressure him to choose sides? No. What did our Saturdays look like? Pancakes, sidewalk chalk if the weather was good, a library run, quiet time with puzzles, sometimes a movie that doesn't make your heart rate spike. She wrote quickly, neat block letters. She asked if she could see his room.
I led her down the hall to the guest room I now called the Blue Room, where I'd put up removable star decals and a shelf with picture books that smelled like paper and summer. Nothing permanent, I said lightly. No reason to make a judge think I'm building a treehouse on someone else's backyard. She didn't laugh, but the corners of her eyes softened. She opened drawers, which didn't bother me because they held exactly what they should. Pajamas, an extra toothbrush, a little box labeled treasures that contained a smooth rock and the button he insisted was lucky. She noticed the notes taped at kid-eye level. We say sorry when we forget our gentle hands. We help clean up. They were written in marker with little hearts. Because I am the person I am. She asked about discipline. I told her time ends, not timeouts. Naming feelings, a timer shaped like a tomato when we need to transition. Nothing harsh, I fed. I worked in a school for 30 years. Yelling just teaches the walls you're upset. By the time she left, the tea had sweated itself to lukewarm, and my shoulders ached from trying not to tense them. She shook my hand. Thank you for your cooperation, she said. You'd be surprised how many people make this difficult. I've been told I'm relentless, I said, not difficult. 2 days later, she called. I met with Tyler at school, she said. We drew pictures together. He drew a dragon. That tracks, I said, smiling despite myself. He told me at Grandma's we use soft hands, and at Mommy's house we don't spill. Miss Patel paused. He also said Grandma doesn't like yelling. That's not an allegation, it's a preference. He didn't disclose any concerning behavior here. She cleared her throat. We'll be closing this as unfounded unless something new emerges. I thanked her, set down the phone, and leaned on the counter until my knees quit wobbling. I didn't cry. I'd done enough crying for one legal saga. I did, however, allow myself the small luxury of calling Janelle and saying, "Score 1 for boring goodness." She said, "Document the closure, then go buy yourself something with a battery or a warranty. Those give clean victories." I bought new smoke detectors. Sensible shoes, sensible victories. If there's a theme to the year I turned 66, it's that the truth doesn't always arrive as a thunderclap. Sometimes it lands like mail, steady, dated, stamped by people who don't care about your family drama. The letter from child welfare closed the matter in the kind of words that keep you from losing sleep. Unsubstantiated, no further action. I slid it into my binder. Visitation, evidence of compliance. The house sale proceeded to closing like a reluctant mule, slow, stubborn, but forward. The buyer's inspector found nothing catastrophic beyond what we already knew, and the lender, satisfied with my recorded deed of trust and the equitable lien order, wired money without asking me to donate my backbone. The check hit my trust account with a little digital chime that felt like a bell ringing at the end of a school day. I half expected a janitor to wheel a trash can past and wink. And then life, as sharp as it had been, softened around the edges. My Saturdays with Tyler uncrumpled. He did spill things. He's 5. Gravity is undefeated. And we said whoops and reached for a towel. He asked about the old house, and I answered like you answer kids, honestly, without crowding their heads. I said, sometimes grown-ups make changes. Our job is to be kind while we adjust. He nodded like I'd explained thermodynamics. Mark began to call more. Not a flood, but just a trickle that didn't feel like bribery. A check-in after a dentist appointment, no cavities, and a request for my meatloaf recipe, a photo of Tyler wearing a too big brown sweatshirt like a dress. He asked if I'd come over once to help them hang curtains in the rental. I said yes, with the caution of a woman who has reopened her heart with the smallest key she could find. We hung the curtains. Jessica stood there, hands fidgeting like a person at a podium who'd lost her speech. She said thank you. She did not say sorry. I noticed that she wasn't helming,
The ring light stood in the corner like a plant someone forgot to water. A week later, I got a message from Irene. Someone's been asking about you at Bunko. I prepared myself for the thrill of small-town gossip, but what I didn't expect was the tone, curiosity, not malice. Is it true, one of the women asked over bingo cards, that you secured your interest with a trust? I wish I'd done that with my daughter's condo. Another woman chimed in about her nephew and a truck bought on promises. We ended up in an impromptu clinic about family money and paperwork. I told them the unromantic truth. Write it down. Not because you don't trust each other, but because you do. You protect the relationship from the deal. You'd have thought I was teaching a new crochet stitch the way pens came out of purses.
And just when he thought he had me backed into a corner, he forgot who he was dealing with. Stick with me, because you'll want to see how this plays out. About then, an email landed from a brand manager I didn't know. Hello, Linda. I represent several creators in the family lifestyle space. I'm reaching out regarding a former partner, Jessica X. We're conducting routine due diligence on past collaborations. We'd appreciate any context you can provide about the situation described in public court records. The note was professional, not prying. It startled me that somewhere out there, my boring equitable lien had entered a database that marketers scan before cutting checks. I didn't respond to gossip. I did send a one-line reply. Please refer to public court records. I have no comment beyond what is filed. Boundaries are habits. You have to keep them in shape. Later that week, at pickup, Tyler handed me a construction paper card. The front had a dragon that looked like a lizard on a bender. Inside, in kindergarten capitals, it said, "I love Grandma, soft hands." He'd glued a button in the corner, the lucky one. I felt my throat go hot in that way that makes you swallow twice. "Where'd you get the button?" I asked. "From your jar," he said, proud. "I put my luck in the card. You can keep it." I taped it above the kitchen desk, where I keep the bills. Every time I wrote a check or balanced a statement, that button reminded me, love is a practice, not a posture. You'd think we'd coast toward the credits then, but there was one last tangle. A knot in the net that my little boat had to glide past or tear on. In late October, Mark called with a tone I know from boys on the cusp of honesty, contrition tied to a practical need. Our lease is up in December. The landlord wants a year extension and a rent jump we can't swing. There's a duplex on Maple with a decent school zone. We can afford it if we can fix the credit slice from the HOA thing. The lender says if we can show the lien's been satisfied and there are no outstanding civil issues, we're good. Can you send me that appellate order and the satisfaction of your trust deed? I am not a monster. I sent the documents within the hour. I also took a breath and said, Mark, before you sign anything, can we have a grown-up meeting? No ambushes, just expectations. If you want my help ever again, childcare, a bridge loan, a stamp at the post office, you and I write things down, both of us. We initial margins if we sneeze. He said deal, so fast it startled me. Then he added quietly, Mom, I'm in therapy. He said it like he was announcing a new appliance. I told him I was proud. He said he didn't know why he'd laughed that day in the kitchen. He said, I felt watched. Like if I admitted Tyler did something wrong, I'd be admitting I wasn't enough as a dad. He paused. Jess and I, we got caught up in appearing fine. We weren't. Appearing fine is a full-time job with terrible benefits. We met at a coffee shop with lighting that made everyone look 15% kinder. Janelle wasn't there. This wasn't a legal thing. It was a human thing with pens. I brought a simple agreement that if I ever contribute more than $500 to a family purchase or expense, we'd specify in writing whether it was a gift, a loan, or equity, with terms. We both signed. Tessica signed too. I made copies. I put them in my binder behind a new tab labeled Future Sanity. On the way out, Jessica touched my sleeve. She said, I'm taking a class at the community college, small business accounting. It's Tuesday nights. She said it like she was asking permission to be new. Good, I said. Numbers will tell you when your feelings are lying. The duplex on Maple came through. It wasn't glossy, it had good bones and a backyard that begged for a sandbox. We spent one Saturday assembling flat-pack furniture and not talking about past crimes. Tyler and I drew a dragon on the new driveway that wrapped around a chalk hopscotch and ended at a box that said, "Start over." He jumped in it like a kid who understood metaphors better than some adults. Then, as if to test the new scaffolding we were building, my church hosted a fall festival. There was a cakewalk, I made brownies, a silent auction, I bid on a basket of candles and lost to Irene, and a file folder of legal aid resources for interfamily financial agreements that a deacon suddenly decided was very relevant and also very discreetly placed near the chili. A woman I didn't recognize, early 30s, approached me by the apple bobbing tank. "Are you Linda?" she asked. I braced for a Facebook spill. Instead, she said, "My mom gave my husband and I money for our house. We almost did it wrong. Then someone at Bunko told her about your situation." She flushed. "We wrote it down. Everyone's sleeping better. I wanted to say thank you."
I went home that evening, sat on my back steps with a bowl of leftover chili, and watched the sky do that thing it does in October. Turn sherbet and then navy, while the neighborhood exhales. I thought about how often women my age are told we're fussy or bitter, when what we are is thorough. Thoroughness saved me. Thoroughness might save someone else. The last piece of justice didn't arrive with a gavel. It came in an email from Ms. Patel, the investigator with the canvas tote, asking if I'd be willing to speak to a small group of grandparents at the community center about supporting without enabling and documenting love with clarity. I laughed out loud. Documenting love sounded like something you'd embroider on a pillow right after "bless this mess." But she was right. I said yes. I made a trifold board like it was 7th grade science fair. I titled it, in block letters, "Love is not a gift receipt, but money needs one." The morning of the talk, I wore a cardigan with pockets deep enough to hide a life story. 10 grandparents showed up. One had a nose ring. One wore a veteran's cap. We talked about boundaries and bake sales and the gentleman from row 2 who co-signed on his grandson's truck so the boy could get to work, and then watch the payments vanish like coins in a magician's palm. We practiced saying sentences that feel weird in the mouth but sound like rescue in real life. This is a loan. This is a gift. This is equity. We laughed about how romance readers talk about grumpy sunshine and decided money is grumpy unless you give it rules. Halfway through, my phone buzzed with a text from Mark. It was a photo of Tyler holding a library book at story time, beaming like he discovered the moon. Under it, he'd written, "We're okay." I stared at those 2 words and felt something in my chest settle into a place it hadn't sat in since the whisk clattered into the sink. Not perfect, not healed to glossy, but okay. You could end a story there. You could roll credits over a woman at a folding table explaining equitable liens to a room full of grandparents while her grandson learns to whisper in a library. But this is a revenge story, and revenge, when it's righteous, isn't about ruin. It's about renovation. The rotten wood comes out, you sand, you crime, you pay attention to every inch, and then you build something stronger where the rot used to be. Which is why, 3 months after the sale, when my CPA slid across the table a tidy summary of what the IRS would need to see if anyone tried to reclassify the down payment as a gift, when he chuckled and said, "You've built a fortress out of file folders, Linda," I finally allowed myself the smallest exhale of triumph. Not a cackle, just an older woman's version of a fist pump.
I scheduled a cruise with Irene for spring. Caribbean, balcony, paid in full with a tiny slice of the interest on the money they'd tried to call love. Before we could toast to sea breezes, though, a final email pinged from Janelle. It read, FYI, the court awarded you costs on appeal. She'd attached the order. The amount wasn't huge, it was symbolic. A tidy row of numbers that said, you were right to fight. I texted a photo of the order to my sister up in Michigan, who replied with 17 exclamation points! And because she is who she is, get the good sunscreen! I went to bed that night with the window cracked just enough to hear the leaves skitter across the sidewalk. Somewhere in the duplex on Maple, my grandson probably kicked his covers off and mumbled dragons. Somewhere in town, a woman logged off Instagram and opened a spreadsheet. Somewhere else, a man my age checked the lock on his file cabinet and thought about the day he learned that gift is not a magic word if it hides a debt to decency. And just when I thought the story had settled into its final shape, the past knocked softly, persistently, like a neighbor at dusk with a pie you didn't ask for. On my porch sat a paper bag with a plastic container inside. No note. Oatmeal cookies, the kind with too many raisins, Mark's favorite when he was 8. I knew the recipe. I could smell the extra cinnamon Jessica adds when she's nervous. I stood there in the pooling porch light and understood it for what it was. Not absolution, not even apology. A peace offering in carbohydrates. I brought them in. I ate one. It was too sweet. It was also good. I know this part is hard to hear, but it's important. The truth was about to come out, and it was going to be glorious. Because a week later, the preschool director asked if I could stop by for a quick chat. I showed up expecting to discuss snack rotations. Instead, she set down a stack of forms. The school district's family contacts for next year. Mom filled these out. She asked to list you as an emergency contact and a pickup authorization again. She also asked if you'd be open to alternating Wednesday afternoons this spring so Tyler can do library club. The director smiled. It's not custody, it's cooperation.
The old me, the one from the whisk day, might have turned that into a victory speech. The new me just nodded, signed where it said signature, and tucked the copy into my tote. I was halfway to the parking lot when my phone buzzed. Mark, we're grilling Saturday, 5 p.m., no cameras. Will you come? I typed, I'll bring potato salad, no raisins. He sent a laughing emoji, one of the few modern hieroglyphics I understand, and a thumbs up. He was about to get exactly what he deserved, and I had a front row seat. Not ruin, not a public shaming, just the quiet, daily consequence of learning, owned in a backyard with a wobbly picnic table where the only thing filmed is the smoke getting in your eyes and the only thing captured is the memory of doing better than before. I wore my good pearl studs to the barbecue. Not fancy, just the ones from JCPenney that make me stand up a half-inch straighter. Mark had strung cafe lights across the duplex patio, and the air smelled like someone else's Saturday. Char, citronella, and the reboot of a family trying to sound normal. We were passing Buns when Jessica's phone lit up on the picnic table. She had it face up, an old habit from the content days. A preview banner flashed, bright as a flare. K. Did CPS scare her straight? Can't believe your anonymous report went nowhere. I didn't mean to read it, but it's hard to unsee your name in a burning building. Jessica snatched the phone up as if it were a baby bird that had flown into a fan. Her eyes darted to me and then away. She fumbled,
shoved the phone into her back pocket, and busied herself with pickles that didn't need rearranging. Anonymous. Of course it had been her. I had suspected, but I don't swing hammers without nails. And then, 3 days later, Providence handed me both. Miss Patel called to close the loop. She said, "We're filing the case closure formally. I thought you should know something we put in our internal notes. Tyler made an age-typical disclosure during the sand tray exercise. No pressure, no leading. He said, 'Mommy told me to tell the lady Grandma says bad things, but I forgot what to say.' We don't use that as a cudgel, but it matters for pattern." She paused. Also, the caller reached out to our office a second time for an update, referred to the original report as mine, and left a callback number. We preserve logs. Again, we don't prosecute. Our job is safety, but you are within your rights to consult counsel if there's a pattern of malicious reporting. The number she read was familiar. The same area code as the salon downtown and the pediatric dentist, the one I had saved in my phone under Jessica, cell. Miss Patel couldn't say it belonged to her. That would be beyond her lane. But the shape of the truth was standing in the doorway waving. I didn't shout. I didn't post. I did what had saved me all year. I made a plan. Janelle drafted a letter that was both velvet and steel. It cited the state statute on knowingly making false or frivolous reports to child welfare, the civil remedies available for harassment, and the fresh logs from the agency. It did not threaten jail. It did not bark. It offered an off-ramp. We would forego any action if the party responsible signed a stipulation filed with the court in our now quiet case, acknowledging that the prior report was unfounded, agreeing not to make further reports absent genuine, articulable concern, and consenting to a written rotating grandparent schedule memorialized in the court's standing order. We also included one more small sentence: reimbursement of my attorney's fees associated with responding to the investigation. Not punitive, precise. Facts have a way of behaving when you put them in straight lines. The response came back same day, which is warp speed in legal time. It wasn't an apology. It was better. Signatures. I picture the scene. Jessica at the rental's kitchen island, pen scratching while she mutters about overreacting. Mark standing behind her with that tight jaw he gets when the bill is due. The stipulation arrived with 2 names and a cashier's check to Janelle's trust account for my fees. Breathable justice. I didn't frame it. I slid it into my binder under a new tab. False report disposition. You might think that's the glorious truth I teased earlier. It is in part, but the bigger truth was quieter. The moment you stop trying to get an apology in the form you fantasize and accept a binding promise instead, your blood pressure thanks you. I got the thing that actually protects my time with Tyler, the thing that has ink in the county's bones. I got Wednesdays.
The first Wednesday, Tyler and I went straight from school to the library. He ran his hand along the spines like they were piano keys. We checked out 3 dragon books, one about a mouse who runs a soup restaurant, and an early reader with a dog named Dut. At home, we ate spaghetti and practiced soft hands with the Parmesan shaker. He told me Mommy was learning money in a class and Daddy had a feelings notebook. He told me he liked my potato salad because I don't put raisins in places they shouldn't be. 5 years old, a prophet. The next week, the truth knocked again, wearing khakis and a lanyard. It was the preschool director, stopping me at pickup with that look sensible women use when they've decided to become accomplices for something righteous. "We updated our family engagement policy," she said. "We're inviting grandparents to a workshop on boundaries, expectations, and agreements. Ms. Patel is co-presenting. she smiled. Would you do the last 10 minutes? You know, your folder thing? My folder thing. Lord, I am 66 and I have a brand. I said yes. And just when he thought he had me backed into a corner, he forgot who he was dealing with. Stick with me because you'll want to see how this plays out. The workshop was held in the multipurpose room, the place where music class happens, and once a year someone tries to microwave fish. I wore flats and a cardigan with pockets deep enough for 3 highlighters and a pack of tissues. 15 grandparents and 4 parents circled in plastic chairs. Ms. Patel, measured as always, covered the basics: how to support without undermining, how to document, how to distinguish "I'm uncomfortable" from "the child isn't safe." Then she handed me the floor. I didn't sermonize. I did show them the tabs. Down payment, proof. Title, communications. Visitation, orders. False report, disposition. Future sanity, agreement. I held up the pen I use, a cheap black rollerball. I said, this was my sword and shield. Not a Facebook post, not a screaming match. Paper. I told them the sentence that saved me. You protect the relationship from the deal. We practiced saying it out loud. The man with the veteran's cap said it twice, louder the second time. As folks packed up, a polite young woman in a blazer approached me. Mrs., she said, I'm with the county legal aid. We're developing a family money 101 kit, templates for loans, gifts, and equity. Would you be willing to consult? We can offer an honorarium. I laughed so hard I had to sit down. Imagine, a check with my name on it because I insisted people write checks properly. I took the job. It wasn't about money. It was about covering the table in instructions so the next woman with a whisk and a good heart doesn't end up supervised in a room with plastic toys. We met Thursday mornings at a bland county office. I brought lemon bars because that's my brand too. The templates we built were simple, humane, in big font. Loan had a payment schedule and a clause about late fees that didn't read like a threat. Gift had no strings because that's what a gift is. Equity included recording instructions in plain English. Go to the recorder's office, smile, bring ID. We pilot tested it at a senior center. A week later, the director emailed, we've had 15 people use the forms already. Fewer tears, more clarity. Meanwhile, life at the duplex softened around the edges like a well-worn sweatshirt. Jessica stopped staging dinner like it needed to submit for audit. She burned a chicken and laughed. I know this because she texted me a photo with the caption, "Is this Cajun?" I sent back a rescue plan. Shred, add broth, call it tacos. She replied with a taco emoji, and later a picture of Tyler with guacamole in his hair. Not everything needs a court order. Mark showed up at my house one evening with a plastic toolbox and the look of a man who wants to fix something he can't name. Sink stripping? He asked. It was. He tightened a thing, replaced a gasket, wiped his hands on the rag I keep under the sink. He stood to leave, and then didn't. Mom, he said, words slow, thank you for not throwing us away. I didn't throw you away. I threw out your bad habits. He smiled the smile he had when he was 8, and we'd catch lightning bugs and release them. Relief, disguised as wonder.
Then came the part that, earlier in the year, would have felt like the headline. Now it arrived like a footnote to a story that had learned to pace itself. Jessica asked to meet for coffee, alone. We sat on the patio of a place that survives on scones and nostalgia. She held her cup with 2 hands like a child. I'm sorry, she said. Not if, not but. Just the hard, clean version. I was wrong about the house, about the report, about a lot. She swallowed. I was terrified of not being enough, of people seeing we needed help. I took your help and then treated you like a threat so I could pretend I didn't need it. I looked at the girl who had once told me to stop whisking, like I was a kitchen appliance with opinions. She looked smaller without the ring light. Thank you, I said. That matters. I can't fix all of it, she said, but I can start. She slid a piece of paper across the table. It was a letter on her letterhead, addressed to whom it may concern, but specific where it counted. I acknowledged that Linda M. contributed $85,000 to our down payment, with the understanding she would receive an ownership interest. I confirmed that the funds were not a gift. It was signed in pen, not pixels. I'm applying for a part-time administrative job, she said, almost sheepish. The application asks about any public disputes and how I resolved them. I figured this might say something I needed to hear myself say. I took the paper. I didn't need it legally, but I wanted it because closure is a quilt. You stitch in every square you can. We walked to our cars, suddenly shy. Before she buckled in, she called out, "Oh, and Linda." "Yes." "Tyler wants to be a dragon for Halloween. Will you help me with the tale?" "Yes," I said and meant 1,000 things. The tale was a masterpiece that would have gotten us a blue ribbon at the county fair. Green felt, triangles, a wire hanger stitched into a curve. We sewed at my dining table while Tyler helped by sorting buttons and adding 2 to everything because 2's my lucky number now. Jessica apologized again, smaller this time. Each sentence a stitch that didn't undo old seams but made new ones stronger. We didn't rehash the slap. We didn't need to. We were busy with a tale. Halloween came with leaves that crackled under sneakers and a sky the color of an aluminum mixing bowl. Tyler's dragon costume drew a crowd. He roared politely and said thank you to anyone who called him scary. We took a photo on my porch, me in my cardigan, Jessica with a smear of eyeliner like a wicked witch who forgot to be wicked. Mark holding a plastic pumpkin his son had shoved at him. The picture looked like peace if you squinted. If you're waiting for the other shoe to drop, for Jessica to relapse into content, or Mark to flake, or me to go nuclear, I want you to hear this like a bell. Sometimes the last act of a revenge story is choosing ordinary. Revenge that stays hot eats you. Revenge that cools into boundaries and budgets feeds you for years. I took the cruise with Irene, Caribbean, balcony. We read trashy novels and sensible nonfiction and ordered room service scrambled eggs just because we could. On the second morning at sea, I stood at the railing, the water a blue so bossy it yelled at the sky. I thought about the women I'd been the day the whisk hit the sink and the slap stung more from the laugh. I thought about the courtroom, the stop work notice glued to the garage, the binder tabs, the teen clerk with the Kleenex near the cantaloupes. I thought about a little boy who learned to say sorry without prompting, and who now sorted buttons by size and kindness. When I got home, a letter waited in my mailbox. Not a bill, not a court, anything. A thick envelope embossed with the county seal. Inside, a certificate and a note from the community center. In recognition of your service to families navigating intergenerational support with dignity. The certificate was corny. It also made me cry in that good, leaking way that feels like the body taking out its own trash. Mark framed it. He brought over the Home Depot bag with the cheapest frame you've ever seen and set it on my mantle with a little flourish like he was presenting a trophy. "You're a big deal," he said, teasing. "Can I book you for a talk? I'll pay in tacos."
"You still shred the chicken too dry," I said, and we laughed, a sound that sits better than it did a year ago because it's not at my expense. A week later, there was one more courtroom, but no drama. Just a quiet, administrative hearing to finalize the grandparents' schedule and enter the stipulation about the CPS report. The judge glanced at the file, at the signatures, at my cardigan, I swear they can tell character by knit patterns, and said, "This court appreciates when families choose order over chaos." He stamped the paper. The sound was a period, a firm one. Outside the building, Jessica put out her hand. I shook it. Then, because I am who I am, I pulled her into a hug that lasted exactly 3 seconds. A hug you can measure. She didn't cry, neither did I. We are women who save our tears for produce aisles. We drove home. Wednesday came. Tyler and I drew a dragon that looped around the block and back onto itself, tail and mouth, a circle. "It's called an oro, he mangled the word like it was saltwater taffy. "Ouroboros," I supplied, "a dragon that eats its tail and starts over." "Why?" he asked, earnest. "So he remembers he's whole," I said. He considered this and then declared, "We're whole." He pressed a button into my palm, not from my jar, his own, a shiny one he'd earned at school for sharing. "For your next folder," he said solemnly.
Here's the final truth I promised, the one we earned. I didn't win because a judge loved an old lady in pearls. I didn't win because the internet sided with me or because an HOA discovered its inner sheriff. I won because I acted like the adult in the room, even when I was the only one. I wrote it down, I showed up, I learned the boring words that move mountains. Equitable lien, deed of trust, stop work, unfounded. And then I did the most radical thing of all. You ready? I forgave exactly as much as was safe, no more, no less, and I kept my binder. He was about to get exactly what he deserved, and I had a front row seat. What he got wasn't ruin, it was responsibility. What she got wasn't cancellation, it was a class at a community college and a calendar with Wednesdays marked in green. What I got wasn't a house, it was a home in my own skin again. If you're ready for this journey, make sure you hit that subscribe button and give this a like so you don't miss the updates. And let me know in the comments what city you're watching from. It's always lovely to see where everyone is. And now that it's done, I'd love to hear from you. What would you have done in my place? Where would you have drawn your lines?
So, another story of my grandmother has end, and be clicking here, you will have when more such stories.